Order, please. Before we begin the day routine, the subject for this evening's late debate was submitted by the honourable member for Halifax Fairview. There be it resolved the government stop delaying the construction of the new residential care centre in Cosette Heights, Sydney. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the day routine presenting reading petitions. The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition signed by 49 members of the Nova Scotia Government and General Employees Union, the operative clause of which reads as follows: We, the undersigned, call on the Ham government to withdraw Clause 46 of Bill 62 in favour of an extensive round of discussions with NSG, EU, and CUPE that will conclude by the end of 2004 about longer-term solutions to the funding problems of the plan and the possibility of joint governance or trusteeship. Mr. Speaker, I have affixed my signature to the petition.
Petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Table of reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce or to submit the business plan for AgriPoint International for the year 2004-2005.
Report is tabled. Statements by ministers. Government notice the motion. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a select committee on petroleum product pricing is to be formed based on equal representation from each party, therefore be it resolved that A, this host declares that a select committee on petroleum product pricing be established, and B, this host declares that a select committee be comprised of such members as the striking committee shall determine, an equal number of whom shall be members of the government party, an equal number of whom shall be members of the official opposition, an equal number of whom shall be members of the third party in the House, and the government House leader shall designate one of the members of the Select Committee as chair. And C, the mandate of the Select Committee is to examine petroleum product markets and current factors that determine existing prices with the intent to make a determination whether current prices are justified. This examination is to include, but not limited to, the following issues: the reason for the current level of product prices, product supply, reasons for volatility in product prices, the rationale for differences in prices across different regions of the province, factors that affect the viability of low-volume outlets in rural and urban marketplaces, factors that affect the viability of independent retail operators in the provinces, and any evidence of predatory pricing practices at wholesale and retail levels of the marketplace. The Select Committee is to make recommendations related to what it deems are just and reasonable product prices at the consumer level and in terms of retail and wholesale margins, and any other actions it determines may be required to correct imbalances in the distribution and sale of these products to consumers in the province. And D, if this House is not sitting when the final report is complete by the Select Committee shall table the report with the Clerk of this House by August 31st, 2004. E, the House declares, pursuant to Section 36 of the House Assembly Act, that the committee shall not be dissolved by prorogation of the House. Prorogation of the House and the Select Committees is authorized to continue its inquiry after the House is prorogued. And F, that all powers and privileges of the House of Assembly Act applicable to committees apply and are in full force and effect during the sitting of the Select Committees. And G, the House requests the Legislature's Internal Economy Board, on behalf of the Select Committee, to employ such members and staff as may be necessary to enable the Select Committee to carry out its duties. And H, the House requests the Legislature's Internal Economy Board to provide the Select Committee, its members and its staff with such facilities and funds as are required to carry out its functions as provided for by Section 80 of the Public Service Act. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Any further ministerial resolutions? The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Coast magazine has just released its 3rd annual Best of Food Reader Survey. Whereas this year's Best New Restaurant and Best Brunch winner is Halifax's Jane's on the Common. And whereas the idea for Jane's on the Common hatched from a single mother of 2 who wanted to be able to reconnect to her neighborhood and family, a former NDP researcher who in a previous life spent many a day and an evening working at this legislature. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Jane Wright on the success she has attained to date in what is a very competitive business, and wish her all the luck as she continues to provide hearty, home-cooked meals at her Halifax eatery. And, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Maurice Comeau, an employee with the Department of Natural Resources, has used his training and experience as a forest technician to initiate several projects in the Digby County area, and whereas most recently, as president of the Digby Elementary Home and School Association, Maurice brought together government organizations to establish an educational woodlot that will be a tool available for teaching our children about different forest management techniques. And whereas Maurice has worked on other projects, such as the construction of a bird viewing platform at Mavelet Beach, and he has participated in the National Forest Week school visits, is a beaver leader and a volunteer firefighter in the community. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House recognize and congratulate Maurice for his activities involving in his community. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Where Scotland was ruled by the British Parliament since 1707 Act of Union, where Scotland voted to have their own Parliament in 1999, whereas Dr. Winnie Ewing, the oldest member of the Scottish Parliament, declared on May 12, 1999, the Scottish Parliament, which adjourned on March 25, 1707, is hereby reconvened. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognise the important ties that Nova Scotia has with Scotland and congratulate the Scottish Parliament on its 5th anniversary. And, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Department of Justice sponsored a training program for 18 members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the military, the Department of Natural Resources, and municipal police from Truro, New Glasgow, Cape Breton Municipality, and Spring Hill. And whereas Train the Trainer program supports the safety of law enforcement officers and the general public in Nova Scotia. And whereas these trainers will receive their certificates tomorrow after 2 weeks of intensive training. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the graduates of the Officer Safety Instructor course and thank them for their public service. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting the Price of Petroleum Products.
Order, please.
Want me to introduce that again?
Yes, please.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting the Price of Petroleum Products.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting the Price of Petroleum Products.
Bill 79, entitled An Act Respecting the Price of Petroleum Products.
Order this bill be read a second time and a future date. The Honourable Member Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Leader of the Opposition, I beg leave to table a bill, an act respecting fair marketing practices in the sale of gasoline and diesel oil.
Now, Member Cole Harbour Sebastian's begged leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting Fair Marketing Practices in the Sale of Gasoline and Diesel Oil.
Bill 80, entitled An Act Respecting Fair Marketing Practices in the Sale of Gasoline and Diesel Oil.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice the motion. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas amateur boxing is a sport which promotes self-discipline, health, and self-assurance, and whereas Nova Scotians have long distinguished themselves on the national boxing scene, and whereas on May 2nd, Mr. Jeremy White of Kennecook won the gold medal at the 2004 National Cadet Boxing Championships in St. Catharines, Ontario in the 60-kilogram class. Therefore, be resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Jeremy White on his gold medal victory and the National Cadet Boxing Championships and for upholding the proud tradition of Nova Scotia boxers. And, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Robichaud family have for several generations through their company Robichaud Building Supplies have been active participants in the business community of Metighan, and whereas the current co-owner Marc Robichaud is a highly respected programmer, inventor, and entrepreneur, and whereas the Western Valley Development Authority has recently presented Marc Robichaud with the Innovation Leader of the Year Award during the 2004 Innovation Summit held at Smiths Cove, Nova Scotia. Therefore, it be resolved that this House congratulate Marc Robichaud on his outstanding achievement and wish success in all of his future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver, please.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Eastern Shore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 75th birthday is a date that should not go unrecognized, and whereas Musquodoboit Harbour resident Ada R. Young was 75 years young on April 26th of this year, and whereas family and friends gathered at the Chesapeake Line Centre on April 25th to celebrate this important birthday. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House extend their heartfelt congratulations and best wishes to Ada R. Young on the occasion of her 75th birthday. And, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request waivers are agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 80% of Crown land is not designated as protected, and whereas in 1992 a network was to be established to represent 80 distinct natural regions of Nova Scotia, and whereas only a fraction are represented in the province's protected areas system, and nothing new has been added since 1997. Therefore, be it resolved that this government develop a clear process to identify and establish new protected areas, starting by keeping the promise made in June 2003 to designate Gully Lake and Egg Mountain, James River as protected wilderness areas. And I seek passage and waiver.
Request a waiver. There's several noes. Noes is tabled. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Gaelic Heritage Night was held at Pine Ridge Middle School in Kingston on May the 7th under the direction of Don Hislop, and whereas in its 6-year history, support has come from Lewis McKinnon, President of the Nova Scotia Gaelic Council, then Minister of Tourism and Culture, the Honourable Rodney MacDonald, Hector McQuarrie, Barry Shears, Beth and Jamie McNeil, and Mary Jane Lamond, and 14 Wing Greenwood Pipes and Drums, and whereas Don Hislop and the grades 6, 7, and 8 choirs have raised over $4,000 to support the Nova Scotia Highland Village as they entertain and promote the cause Cum Gaelic Bia, Keep Gaelic Alive. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House congratulate Don Hislop for this advancement of Gaelic culture, music, dance, and piping, and wish him the best in retirement after his 30-year teaching career. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Kentville's Advertiser newspaper has recently been nominated for a Canadian Community Newspapers Association General Excellence Award, And whereas the nomination recognizes the Advertiser as one of the 3 best newspapers in Canada in its circulation class, and whereas Advertiser reporters John DeCoste and Kirk Sterrett have also been nominated for individual awards, therefore be resolved that the members of this House congratulate the Advertiser on its recognition from the Canadian Community Newspapers Association as one of the best 3 newspapers in its circulation class in Canada, and John DeCoste and Kirk Sterrett on their nominations, and wish them all the best at the awards ceremony in June. I request waiver of notice.
Question waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas even in the final stages of the pre-election campaign, the federal government is not committed to fulfilling the Romano Commission recommendation that Ottawa provide 25% of health care funding. And whereas Medicare was established on the basis of 50% federal funding, and whereas Nova Scotia health care would receive another badly needed $250.9 million in 2004-2005 to reduce wait times and improve people's health if the Romano target had been reached. Therefore, be it resolved that this House urges all federal parties to commit themselves to implementing the Romano recommendations for a renewed Medicare program, including 25% federal cost sharing that is dedicated to changing health care for the better. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage of the bill.
Here's several noes. Noes to table. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Young member. Order, please. Young member from Annapolis has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to do an introduction before I read my resolution, if you don't mind. Thank you. I want to draw the members' attention to the West Gallery, where we have Jennifer Taylor, who is the Executive Director of the Evangeline Trail Tourism Association, as well as Derek Lagarde, who is the new president as of last Tuesday, May 11th. And Derek also operates the Falcourt Inn, which happens to be in my riding, and he resides in Nixa. So I'd ask you to both stand and receive the warm welcome of the host.
We welcome our guest to the gallery today, the Honourable Member for Annapolis, on this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Don Johnson Cup, the Atlantic Championship for the Junior B Hockey League, was recently held in Antigonish, and whereas the Sackville Blazers were successful in winning their 2nd consecutive title, and whereas Jason Varon, a Bridgetown resident, was named Most Valuable Player with 11 goals and 8 assists in 17 playoff games, and again leading the league as a top scorer in the regular season, therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Jason Varon and the entire Sackville Blazers team on their victory. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Milton Mackenzie of Scottsburn, Pictou County, celebrates his 100th birthday on May the 20th, 2004. And whereas Milton was a farmer all his life, and he and his wife still reside on the family farm, and whereas there's no nobler calling than being a farmer and providing food for your fellow man, therefore it be resolved that the members of this Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulate Milton Mackenzie on his 100th birthday and wish him continued good health and happiness. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Millennium Scholarship Foundation was in Halifax yesterday to hold discussions with students, parents, and financial aid administrators in order to receive advice about revamping their program. Whereas this province has once again boasted a balanced budget, all the while failing to disclose that they balance their books on the backs of students who can least afford it. Whereas the provincial government still would not admit to causing students in this province extreme duress by cutting the $6 million loan remission program when it received $9 million from the Millennium Foundation in 2000. The province only replaced the money, or to be precise, 50% of the money, once the Millennium Foundation threatened to pull the scholarship fund out of Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that the government listen to the students of the province during discussions with the Millennium Scholarship Foundation and provide our leaders of the future with the respect they so much deserve. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Hear a no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ron Fielding was named to the Honour Roll of the Toronto Sport Heritage Society for Excellence in Hockey, whereas Ron Fielding, following an outstanding career as a minor hockey player, was a member of the 49-50 and 50-50-51 Halifax St. Mary's Junior team, which won the Maritime Junior title and competed in the Memorial Cup Playdowns. Whereas Ron Fielding, following an outstanding career, Mr. Speaker, I apologize, I'm going to have to read this again.
The member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas social workers are obligated to lobby on behalf of their clients, and whereas when child protection workers came to this legislature 2 years ago today to protest high workloads and unfilled positions, the government rewarded their dedication by docking a day's pay. And whereas members of the NSGEU's Community Services Working Group are coming here today to mark the anniversary of that less than auspicious event, therefore be it resolved that this House condemns the draconian and unwarranted actions of the Department of Community Services against 12 dedicated and caring child protection workers May 13, 2002. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Waiver. Hear no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today at the Community Services Committee meeting, representatives of Women's Centres Connect confirmed that homelessness was a major issue of concern for many of the 15,000 clients they serve annually. And whereas government officials overseeing the federal provincial affordable housing agreement of $37 million needs the input of all major stakeholders on the issue of homelessness, particularly Women's Centres Connect. And whereas Women's Centres Connect representatives have also confirmed the provincial government has not consulted with their organization in any way on ways to best achieve affordable housing. Therefore, be it resolved, the Minister of Community Services consult with Women's Centres Connect on how to best spend the $37 million committed to affordable housing. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice.
Waiver. Here no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member for Guysborough, Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, hereby I give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the provision of drilling fluids and related technical engineering is a core service required by offshore exploration and development companies, and whereas New Park Drilling Fluids of Houston, Texas has announced that they will be establishing a drilling fluids facility at the Superport Marine Terminal in Mulgrave, and whereas New Park is an international recognized oil and gas industry service provider, and its decision to locate in Mulgrave will aid in the development of supply base operation in the area. Therefore be it resolved that members of this House join me in welcoming New Park Drilling Fluids to the Superport Marine Terminal in Mulgrave and to Nova Scotia, and wish them much success in this new enterprise. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Group of Nine is a coalition of 9 seniors organizations in Nova Scotia with close to 100,000 members, and whereas in June 2002 the Group of Nine appeared before the Romano Commission on Health Care calling for changes to protect our national Medicare system, and whereas the Group of Nine has written to Prime Minister Martin urging the federal government to act now to implement changes recommended by the Romano Commission. Therefore be it resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly commend...
Order, please. Now, Member for Dartmouth North on the therefore be resolved, please.
Why, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you kindly. Therefore be it resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly commend the Group of Nine for their determination to hold the federal government accountable and support them as they press for the real progress in implementing the recommendations of the Romanow Commission on Health Care. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The member for Hants East.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas volunteers are always needed to take positions of responsibility as directors on boards of organizations, and whereas the district health authorities are the bridge between the public and the government, and whereas on Volunteer Awards night, April 21st, 2004, Mr. Jeff McGruer was honored by the municipality of East Hants for his work with the district health authority. Therefore, be it resolved, this House of Assembly congratulate and thank Jeff McGruer for giving of his time and abilities to contribute to the important job of health care delivery. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Westville Police Department and their officers will do anything for their community, and whereas the officers are always involved in learning or teaching new techniques, whether it is on bike safety or neighborhood watch, and whereas the Westville Police Department sponsored an exceptionally successful police emergency expo, which brought in emergency personnel from all over Pictou and Antigonish counties. Therefore, be it resolved that the MLAs in this House of Assembly applaud the efforts of the Westville Police Department as they undertake tasks in their daily lives while also ensuring a safe community for residents and taxpayers of Westville. And I seek waiver of notice.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on March 25th, 1954, the Ladies Auxiliary of the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 12 of Dorchester Street in Sydney, applied for their charter and received it on June 10th, 1954. And whereas the Ladies Auxiliary of the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 12, celebrated their 50 years of service to the Legion and community on Saturday, May 8th, 2004. Whereas Ann Spears, Marjorie Graves, Mildred Huntington, and Ruth McIntyre, who are the original surviving members, received their 50th year pins for their service. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly recognize and honor the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 12 Ladies Auxiliary on their 50 years of service and congratulate Ann Spears, Margie Graves, Mildred Huntington, and Ruth McIntyre for their 50 years of outstanding dedication and service to Branch 12. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Where the Eastern Canadian Trampoline and Tumbling Championships were held May 1st and 2nd, 2004 in Montreal, and whereas the Rainbow Riders gymnastic team of Greenwood represented Nova Scotia with pride and skill and returned home with a bronze medal, and whereas the members of this team are Ashley McGregor, Joanna Wombolt, Abby Hankinson, Cassie Odegaard, Victoria Kennedy, Brittany Blinn, and Haley Ray. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate all members of the Rainbow Riders gymnastic team on a job well done. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Eric Pache has made a valuable contribution to our community as the manager of Tantallon Sobeys, whereas Mr. Pache and his staff have contributed or continued to serve the area during the renovations and additions to this store, whereas Eric Pache always greets his customers with a smile and a helpful hand. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate and thank Eric Pache and the staff of Sobeys Tantallon on their service. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Countermanded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas volunteers play a very integral role in our community, contributing significantly to the quality of life in our communities by providing outstanding volunteer service beyond the call of duty. And whereas Larry Genevak, one of those unsung heroes, be it through his tireless hours with the Mercer Fuels Flames Hockey Club, the Peer Races softball team, and the St. Michael's Police Benefit Society, and among others. Whereas Friday, May 14, 2004, Larry Genevak, volunteer extraordinaire, will be celebrating his 50th birthday. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the Legislative Assembly congratulate Larry Genevak for his outstanding volunteer work, for always being there to answer the call for his community without reward or gain. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on April 28, 2004, the Minister of Community Services was pleased to announce that he was funding a new women's centre in Yarmouth. And whereas the Tri-County Women's Centre opened its doors in Yarmouth on April 2002, due to the efforts of Women for Community Economic Development in Southwest Nova, and with a funding partnership developed with HRDC. Whereas this year will be the first full year since the centre opened that financial support will be provided by the Department of Community Services.
Oh, I see.
Therefore be it resolved that all members of the House recognize the perseverance of the staff and volunteers of the Tri-County Women's Centre in its long road to provincial recognition, and wish them well in the times ahead. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? Is it agreed? Here or no? Notice is tabled. The Honourable Premier. Order, please. The Honourable Premier on introduction. Order, please. The Honourable Premier on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to draw to the attention of the members of the House a visitor in the Speaker's gallery. We have with us today a devoted Nova Scotian, a long-serving member of the local school board and recently appointed manager of the Cape Breton Cabinet Office, Mr. Keith Bain. And I would ask Mr. Bain to rise and receive the welcome of the House.
Certainly welcome our special guest to the gallery today, and hope he enjoys the proceedings. The honourable member of Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ruth Ann Sutherland of St. Luke's United Church in Tantallon traveled recently to Zambia to learn about the impact of HIV and AIDS, and whereas Ruth Ann traveled with 14 other women from across Canada under the sponsorship of the Beads of Hope campaign, whereas this dedicated member of the United Church will use this knowledge to gain greater support for this campaign. Therefore, be it resolved, the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate and thank Ruth Ann Sutherland for her good work in Zambia and in our community. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and if I might be permitted to do an introduction at this time as well, because this resolution goes concurrent with the introduction. And Mr. Speaker, I want to, and I'm very pleased to stand in this Legislative Assembly today and bring to the attention of the members of this Legislative Assembly the students of Dartmouth High. The students of Dartmouth High are students who have been involved in the political science program. Their teacher here, David Houle, is present as well. And Mr. Speaker, yours truly happened to be the Deputy Speaker at one of those sessions of Model Parliament. And I would want the House to rise and receive I would want the students to rise and receive the warm graces of this Legislative Assembly, Mr. Speaker.
Certainly welcome students to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. The honourable member for Dartmouth North on his resolution, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you this resolution follows in exactly the same manner. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Model Parliament offers students the opportunity to participate in a form of parliamentary debate And whereas this process leads to a better understanding of how the democratic process works in Canada, and whereas more than 100 students of Dartmouth High School were involved in this learning experience by creating and supporting their own political parties, each with different ideologies on how to govern. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the students who participated in this year's Model Parliament at Dartmouth High and thank their political science teacher, Donald who assisted in the education of politics, thereby ensuring there will always be candidates offering for political office. Mr. Speaker, and I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Order, please. Orders of the day or questions put by members. Question period will begin at 12:43. We'll end at 1:43. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, the close relationship between the government and the insurance industry is now a matter of public record. A Freedom of Information request we received this week shows just how cozy the relationship is. Here's the timeline. At the end of October, the Conservatives and the Liberals passed legislation they said would get tough on insurance companies. Through the correspondence with the Premier, we say that insurance company after insurance company complained about the definition of a minor injury, and in less than a month, the government caved and introduced regulations, and the Liberals went along for the ride, Mr. Speaker. My question to the minister responsible for insurance is this: why did you cave in to the industry pressure?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the simple answer is that we put through this House legislation that effectively gave back to the consumers of Nova Scotia $55 million over the past 6 months.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, there's a pattern here that cannot be ignored. In October, the government introduced legislation it said would be tough. The industry complained, and by the end of November, the government had introduced regulations to change the definition. In November, Aviva complained that the May 1st rate freeze was unfair, and on December 19th, the province changed the definition of the rate freeze to allow them, Mr. Speaker, to retroactively increase rates. In February, ING asked the April deadline to end facility rate discrimination to be extended, and in March, the minister agreed. So my question is this, Mr. Speaker: after all these facts, how can you prove that the industry just doesn't say jump in? You simply say, how high?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Speaker, as I said yesterday, the proof is in the pudding. The people are satisfied with the rates that they're getting. And, Mr. Speaker, the people of Nova Scotia, the drivers of Nova Scotia, at the present time have the second lowest rates in Canada.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that's nonsense. The minister knows it's nonsense. Insurance companies in this province are laughing all the way to the bank, taking money out of the pockets of consumers and the injured in motor vehicle accidents, right. Mr. Speaker. Shame. These companies made $2.6 billion last year thanks to those guys and to those guys, that's Mr. Right. Speaker. My question to the minister responsible for insurance is this: what makes you think the insurance company needs any more help?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, if we had followed the directions put forward by that party across the way, we'd now be about $250 million in debt setting up a public insurance company.
Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question today is for the Premier. On April 29, 2004, the Minister of Transportation, in response to a question from the member from Digby Annapolis, said, and I quote, we will continue to press the federal government for cost-sharing dollars to complete a section of the 101. Well, Mr. Speaker, I would like to table a letter, please. A letter dated February 26, 2004 from our finance minister to the federal finance minister. That's two months previous to the transportation minister's response. This letter, Mr. Speaker, is to inform the federal finance minister that Nova Scotia can no longer participate in federal provincial cost-sharing programs. So my first question to the Premier is, will the Premier tell this House why his transportation minister misled the member from Digby-Annapolis into believing that his government was interested in cost-shared program with Ottawa?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of fact, we are encouraging the federal government every step of the way to become involved in cost-sharing arrangements. Unlike some other provinces who found themselves in dire straits, have actually indicated to the federal government they will not be participating in those kinds of programs. But it is the intention of this government to continue to encourage Ottawa to provide programs that we can participate in.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I've tabled the letter. I just want to read just one line for the record. This letter is signed by the Honourable Peter Christie, Minister of Transportation, Minister of Finance for the province. It says, we cannot afford to participate in any more federal initiatives proposing a 50-50 federal-provincial cost-sharing effort. And I've tabled a copy of that letter, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, cost-shared programs are a great way for Ottawa to have accountability for the money that they send to the provinces. As we know, Mr. Speaker, accountability is something that this government avoids at all costs. Maybe this letter should come at no surprise. So again to the Premier is it his government's position that they only want federal money if they can spend it on things like a tax cut?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, we want federal funding. We want federal funding for health care. We want federal funding to help us with infrastructure programs. We need a better deal with Ottawa, and we will continue to stress with Ottawa the need for a more equitable sharing of revenue generation in this country. There's a fiscal imbalance in this country that we cannot solve, other provinces cannot solve. We can only solve it in consultation and in collaboration with Ottawa, and we will continue to press Ottawa for that collaboration.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party in your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government continues to mislead the people of Nova Scotia. They said so when they said we could afford a tax cut. They did so when they said education was a priority for the budget. And again, they're trying to do so now, Mr. Speaker, with their Ottawa campaign, when the fact is they are telling Ottawa in writing that they don't want their money. So again, to the Premier, Mr. Premier, do you want Ottawa's money or not? Which one is it?
Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, very definitely we want Ottawa's money. We wanted the money that was in equalization in John Manley's budget a year ago, which disappeared last fall. We want Romano money, which a year and a half ago was recommended by Roy Romano and still not accepted by the government of Canada. We want more money for the offshore, which is what the Campaign for Fairness is all about. This is what we want Ottawa to do. We would like, Mr. Speaker, we would like the federal cousins or the federal brethren of the Liberals in Ottawa to work in the interests of Nova Scotians and demand they give us our share.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Leader, order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when the insurance companies ask, this government just says how much and when. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to quote from some of the letters before the definition of the minor injury was changed. The president of Allstate wrote to the Premier, and I quote, While I understand that work is underway to consider regulatory change in hindsight to this now official legislation, I trust you understand we have little time now and even less tolerance, Mr. Speaker. The President went on to say that he hoped they could address these items in this poorly crafted legislation and return the balance, and they told that to the Liberals as well, Mr. Speaker. My question for the Premier is this: can you explain the government's willingness to accept this arrogant disdain of this House's legislation?
Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, it's interesting, Mr. Speaker, that you have one side of the House promoting an insurance scheme that even by the most conservative estimates is going to cost the taxpayers of Nova Scotia $100 million. And we came up with a program, Mr. Speaker, that delivered into the pockets of the taxpayers $55 million. Look, do you want to spend 100 or do you want to have 55 coming to the taxpayers? We'll take the $55 million going into the pockets of the taxpayers.
Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier knows that most recent reports have said that it would cost not a penny to the consumers, Mr. Speaker, and reap great benefits, public insurance. Before the Premier allowed insurance companies to retroactively increase their rates in December, the presidents of Aviva wrote to the Premier on November 13th, and I quote, "We urge you to create a fair playing field by allowing the affected companies, including Aviva, to use the rates filed with the UARB prior to May 1st as a starting point for the 20% rollback mandated by Bill 1. And on December 19th, Mr. Speaker, Aviva was allowed to retroactively increase their rates. So my question to the Premier is this: can you explain your actions?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Nova Scotia are not interested in what happened December the 19th. What they're interested in is what happened the day they got the rebate check back. That's the day they're interested in.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, what happened on 19th, Mr. Speaker, allowed the insurance companies to continue to gouge many consumers in this province. But it didn't stop there, Mr. Speaker, because the Facility Association was supposed to stop basing its rates on discriminatory factors. But in a March letter from the Atlantic president of ING, which was forwarded to the Minister Russell from the Insurance Review Board, ING said they couldn't meet these deadlines, and they wouldn't stop using the discriminatory factors, asking the minister to give them 7 more months. And guess what happened, Mr. Speaker? They caved. My question to the Minister for Insurance is this: can you explain your actions?
The Honourable Order, please. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I like the legislation, and I like it so much that we're going to continue using it.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, time and time again, this minister has publicly claimed that this government is committed to the federal-provincial affordable housing agreement, although in the first 2 years of the program, it has contributed a mere $138,000 of its $18.6 million commitment to create 15 spaces of the 1,500 promised, Mr. Speaker. The minister repeated this claim, Mr. Speaker, on at least 5 occasions in April, Mr. Speaker, in response to questions in this House. And my question to the minister is, was he aware at the time that his colleague, the Minister of Finance, with the full support of the Premier, had rejected federal cost-sharing dollars 2 months earlier?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I would just advise the member opposite that some of the numbers that he's mentioned there are wrong, and if he would go back and double-check them, I think he would take some comfort in that. Thank you.
Now, Member Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, the minister didn't come within light years of asking what I asked him, but he made a comment about my figures being wrong. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing going on in this province with affordable housing. He can talk about figures all he wants. This minister is not aware of anything, Mr. Speaker, not the least of which is the problem he's having with affordable housing. I don't know how many times it has to be said, Mr. Speaker, to get that minister to pay attention. There's a housing crisis in this province, believe it or not. He, as the minister, is supposed to care. But he doesn't, Mr. Speaker, and neither does this government. My first supplementary, Mr. Speaker, will the minister tell this House what steps, if any, he took to plead his case for affordable housing to his cabinet colleagues before they made this outrageous demand of the federal government?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Peter? Sure. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is asking questions of the Minister of Finance, and so I would refer this question to the Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad the honourable member tabled the letter so we can share some more of the contents that he failed to share. What the letter said, Mr. Chairman, is that since Ottawa is not doing its share of the federal government money for health care, we cannot afford any more, and it says any more programs. The programs of housing, the programs of health care and equalization, we expect them to do their part. We can't continue to go onto programs when they fail us on those programs they're already sharing.
Y'all member, order please. Y'all member Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that there's only been 1% of the money that was dedicated to go to affordable housing in this province spent. Now, the minister can refer all the questions he wants to the Minister of Finance, who has totally sent a letter to rejected any federal financing for housing or anything else in this province, and will not admit to that, Mr. Speaker. My question...
No strings attached.
Mr. Speaker, this minister owes Nova Scotians an apology, because of his policy regarding affordable housing in this province.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member Cape Breton South and final supplementary.
Affordable housing in this province, Mr. Speaker, is not available because of the actions of this minister. He has an I don't care about people in this province who need affordable housing. And I want to ask this minister, Mr. Speaker, is he going to tell Nova Scotians that affordable housing is important in this province and get on with the job of providing it?
Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for his passion. I share that passion about those that are in need of affordable housing in this province, and in fact, Mr. Speaker, that is why we are targeting our resources to those lower-income Nova Scotians in need of affordable housing. But with regards to some of the member opposite's concerns, it was interesting with regards to the delays that the federal Liberal Secretary of State and the former Secretary of State responsible for the affordable housing program and Central Mortgage and Housing, Stephen Mahoney, during the recent announcement at Creighton Garish, was commending the approach that we had taken. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Y'all member Halifax Needham.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Premier, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, African Nova Scotian educators from around the province, including the elected African Nova Scotian School Board members, are meeting today and tomorrow to evaluate what progress is being made for Black learners in Nova Scotia. And I can only imagine that a topic of discussion will be the May 10th fax sent by the Honourable Member of Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley, to Mr. Raymond Tynes, who is the African Nova Scotian member of the Chignecto Board. I'll table that fax, Mr. Speaker. In it, the honourable member in question responds to a letter from Mr. Tynes written earlier, and I'll quote what he says to Mr. Tynes. Mr. Tynes, your May 8th missive is both offensive and despicable. You should be clearly ashamed of yourself for including the Dr. King, Martin Luther King statements in your left-wing drivel. Please be accountable and give up on the race card. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the minister, will he apologize to Mr. Tynes, indeed apologize to the other African Nova Scotian board members for the inappropriate comments of the chair of his party's caucus?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I presume that's being tabled so I can have a look at it. Well, I will have a look at it, Mr. Speaker, and I would hope that the member opposite is not lifting this issue out of context. But I'll comment when I'm more familiar with the correspondence.
Young member for Halifax Needham on your order, please. Young member for Halifax Needham on the first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, earlier this week, we saw the painfully unfunny joke told publicly by another member of the Premier's caucus. And today we have this insensitive and inappropriate comments from the chair of the Tory caucus to an elected official at another level of government in this province, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Premier made a big deal about his cabinet having to be subjected to a code of conduct. So I want to ask the Premier if he will institute a code of conduct for members of his own backbench.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The whole issue of conduct is something that is a very broad subject, and we certainly have brought in a code of conduct for members of the front bench of the government of Nova Scotia, and I think it was the right thing to do. But you know, the conduct of all of us in this House is something that we should look at from time to time, and you know, the conduct of the way in which members speak about each other. You know, I'm looking at this, and I only have one piece of documentation in front of me. It sounds very much it is of the level of the kind of comment that we hear on a regular basis in this House.
Order, please. Order, please. The member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, the members of the public in our province, particularly those who are subject to racism, to ageism, to sexism, etc., they expect a higher level of conduct from all of us here. And Mr. Speaker, this display from members of the Premier's party this week, I think, leads the public to question what the Premier is prepared to do. And my final question is to ask the Premier, are you prepared to have members of your caucus on the backbench participate in gender and race sensitivity training?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, the deeper question that lies behind the question the member opposite asked is the whole issue of the conduct of all of us as MLAs. And we are subject to a higher standard. And all of us from time to time, don't meet the standard. And when we don't meet the standard, we expect to come under considerable scrutiny and criticism. What I can say, Mr. Speaker, is the commitment of this government is to serve the people of Nova Scotia, to serve them effectively, and to serve them with dignity.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Tourism, Heritage and Culture. There seems to be some level of disconnect between the Regional Tourism Industry Association and the Department of Tourism. These RTIAs respond to the industry needs in their communities, while bureaucrats seem to want them to follow a plan that differs from the industry demands. So my question is for the Minister, what does he see the role of the Regional Tourism Industry Associations as?
Now, Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for the question. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the Regional Tourism Industry Associations of our province play a vital role, Mr. Speaker. They are at the ground level for us, Mr. Speaker. We work collaboratively with them with respect to fee-for-service arrangements as well as operating our local community visitor information centres.
Now, a member for Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, there also seems to be some concern around funding, and I'm pleased that the Minister raised it. For instance, some RTIAs that serve only one county are receiving $18,000, while the Evangeline Trail Tourism Association, which serves 4.5 counties, receives $23,000. The Evangeline Trail attracted 450,000 visitors last year and generated $162 million in revenue, ranking third in the province behind Halifax and the Cape Breton region. Yet this government has failed to fully recognize its contribution and respond to its quest to get a management agreement to replace the current fee-for-service contract. So my question is, can the minister explain how these organizations are funded and why there is this inequity?
Now, Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, I guess it was about 3 to 4 weeks ago, I met with the presidents with respect to each regional tourism association just across the road, Mr. Speaker, and this was one of the points of discussion which we did have. And Mr. Speaker, if the member is, what the member is suggesting, Mr. Speaker, is that we review this, review the fee-for-service arrangements, and we are doing so, Mr. Speaker. But I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that every part of our province plays a vital role in growing tourism, and we have to take a look at that with respect to the funding arrangements which we do have, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I couldn't agree with the minister more. What they're looking for, though, is equity from one region to another. The value of tourism to the Eastern Trail area is a total of $24 million in federal, provincial, and municipal taxes. In a meeting earlier this year, you indicated to those members that your contribution was so valuable, you committed to writing a letter of support to municipal governments. I'm asking you if you've written that letter, and to whom and to when, and at what time.
Now, Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In fact, I signed the letter last night, Mr. Speaker, and they're going out today.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now we're going to have a little opportunity to contrast the treatment that big insurance companies get to those people in Nova Scotia who have to receive services through the Department of Community Services. In 2001, the department instituted the Employment Support and Income Assistance Programs, claiming it would help Nova Scotians. The reality is that we have seen is this, that it's a backward system of punitive measures, backward policies, and no second chances. Just take this example of the unjust system. The practice of cutting people off of social assistance for withholding information about their income before they've even had a chance to defend themselves, Mr. Speaker. My question for the minister is this. He says people are guilty until they're proven innocent. How does this help Nova Scotians?
Now, Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite for bringing up that question. Mr. Speaker, first of all, we work with people that are in need of assistance in this province. We've invested millions of dollars to do that. In return, we expect them to work with us. But if the member is suggesting that we discover that people have misrepresented the facts in their application and that we cut them off arbitrarily like that, what I would suggest to him is that there is an appeal process in place, and my understanding is that most of the time when the appeal is put in, that the payments are continued until such time as they hear the appeal.
Now we'll leave the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the minister is displaying an astoundingly incomprehensible misunderstanding of the way his own department operates. Mr. Speaker, all it takes is a recommendation from the eligibility review officer to a supervisor, and the client is cut off of assistance and pharmacare benefits immediately. And this all takes place before the client has had a chance to explain the situation before an independent arbitrator. So my question, Mr. Speaker, is this. How can he justify cutting people off before they even get a chance to have their say?
Now, Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what the member opposite is referring to is the role of the eligibility review officers. Basically, these officers are there to safeguard the system, to make sure that it is being carried out with integrity, both in fairness to the clients and the taxpayers. In some cases, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, they discover that there has been basically that the facts have not been stated appropriately to the caseworker, and in some cases, Mr. Speaker, they discover that things more could be done for the clients. So you got to take this in a balance, Mr. Speaker. It's not always just one way. It goes both ways.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
It's hard to explain that balance to people who don't have anything to eat, to people who are being thrown out of their apartments because they haven't received their rent, Mr. Speaker. That's the difficulty. There is no balance in this system. It can take months for people to be reinstated. The department, on the other hand, faces no repercussions whatsoever, while that person ends up with a black mark on their reputation.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the minister and the department faces no repercussions whatsoever, these people end up with a black mark on their reputation, may be kicked out of their apartment for not paying their rent. So I want to ask the Minister of Community Services, why don't you change the policy and continue payments until your investigation process is complete and give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't assume they're guilty until they're proven so.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And then that gets into the appeal process. If somebody feels that they've been hard done by a decision within the department, they have the right to request an appeal. First of all, there's an administrative appeal, and failing that, if they're not satisfied with the outcome, they can launch a formal appeal. In my personal dealings with the local department, the supervisor, long before I was minister, I always found them to be eminently reasonable and would often leave the income assistance benefits in place until the hearing of the appeal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, about 2 years ago, income assistance workers paid a visit to Province House to express their frustrations over caseload and how the volume of this caseload greatly hinders their ability to provide much-needed service to people. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, the minister, time and time again, has sent mixed messages out in regards to this problem. My question to the minister is, could the minister please outline what specific action he plans to take to reduce caseloads and improve the work life for workers who provide services to our most vulnerable citizens, including those with dependent children?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for bringing this up, because as I covered over in the estimates, with the dropping caseloads in community services over the last 4 years, there's been a 16% reduction in the caseload, but yet there are still 235 income assistance caseworkers. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, in fact, the caseload has been dropping, and many good things have been happening within the new employment support and income assistance program for the clients and their caseworkers.
Now, Member Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's easy to reduce the caseload by 16% when you arbitrarily cut people off. And coincidentally with that, the food banks are growing in Nova Scotia. So the Social Assistance Department is cutting them off and they're going to food banks. That's what's happening in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, calls to my constituency office can only lead me to make one conclusion. This department has to hire more social workers and less bill collectors and people who are bean counters to try to save money in that department instead of looking after the very people in our society that need the help of this government. My supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, is could the minister please indicate whether or not income assistance and employment support workers will be involved in any review that's supposed to be taking place by that department to improve the lives of the most vulnerable citizens in our society?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I think actually it is those caseworkers that can receive a lot of credit for the new system that merged the former municipal social assistance programs with the old family benefits programs. And talking with those caseworkers, the pride they take in the positive developments that have come with the new program that have empowered people that previously were, for all intents and purposes, prevented from pursuing a career and getting back into the workforce and all the good things that come with that, they clearly are very, very pleased with many of the recommendations that have showed up in the new program, and clearly we continue to rely on their feedback as we guide the further development of the program.
Now, Member Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's ironic that in this House the Minister of Community Services can stand in his place and tell Nova Scotians that he is proud of the fact that they're saving money in that department when the most vulnerable people in this province are suffering. They're suffering because of the policies of that minister and that department. In regards to the child welfare system, Mr. Speaker, there was a need determined by the Children's Aid Societies, and I would just, and the minister is well aware of that need. Could the minister, in my final supplementary, please indicate whether child protection workers were consulted for input in the review, and if not, will they be consulted for input prior to any changes being made and decisions in your department?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the member opposite has provided me with quite a menu of things to respond to, but one of the things I want to point out, as I have many times before, that over the last few years, even though with the reducing caseload, again 16% in the Department of Community Services, we're very pleased that we have basically maintained the same level of support to the employment support and income assistance clients. This is a good thing for the clients. People are being able to work their way off the system. It's good for the community. We have increased the amount of support for the average client. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have been told that the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board will have to cut more than 40 teaching positions to meet its budget. We've also been told the majority of these cuts will be covered through attrition. Residents in the area are concerned because they have lost more than 100 teaching positions since the year 2000. My question to the Minister of Education is, can you confirm if in fact more than 40 teaching positions will be lost in Cape Breton and what you plan to do about this?
The Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I have not heard that there were 40 positions to be cut in the Cape Breton Victoria School Board. I do know that the population right across the province is lessening. Part of the funding formula is population-based, and quite frank, I suspect that the population in that section of the province was decreasing more rapidly than in other sections, and this is not the first year that has happened, and it's happened in every school board across the province.
Now, a member for Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the residents of Cape Breton have been told that the province plans to review the funding formula for school boards. But this offers cold comfort to an area losing its young people and now its teachers. We know there's going to be a shortage of teachers in a few years. We also know that more and more young people are leaving the province for training. My question to the Minister of Education is, how do you plan to lure young teachers back to the province when our boards are forcing to cut so many positions?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Speaker. The fortunate thing, I guess, if you can look at it as being fortunate, clearly we would like our school population to be increasing, and therefore the numbers of teachers would be increasing. But the good thing right across the province, despite the fact that there will be less teaching positions in 204, 205 than there were in 203, 204, there should not be any people losing jobs, because the number of teachers that are going by retirement is far greater than the number of positions that will be eliminated.
Now, member Cape Breton Nova, your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Shinekto Central Regional School Board recently announced that they are poised to cut 24 teaching positions. We have been told that the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board plans to cut 40. My question to the Minister of Education is, what are you going to do this year to address these cuts?
Now, Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education has increased funding for publication once again this year, and I guess we're all faced with the issue of right sizing, and whether it's in the Shinekto Central, the Cape Breton Victoria School Board, is when the number of students goes down significantly, it does make for good management to reduce the number of people that are serving those students. Now, no question, Mr. Speaker, we'd like to be able to increase the number of teachers, but we have to be realistic too. If the population goes down, then we would expect the number of teachers to go down as well.
The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Economic Development. Trenton Works is an important part of the community and the economy of Pictou County. They've been in business for over 100 years, and there are many third-generation steelworkers there at that plant. On the 29th of April this year, employees were informed that the forge would be closed unless a buyer could be found. This closure will mean the loss of 42 good jobs in a region that cannot afford this kind of economic blow. And since then, Mr. Speaker, we've heard nothing from this government about working to save these jobs. In fact, we're told that over $2 million worth of work contracts have recently been cancelled, and employee morale is low. So, Mr. Minister, what concrete steps has your government taken to keep these jobs at Trenton Works?
Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much. And last week, I believe the member heard the responses, but I will certainly reiterate them to him. In dealing with the company, certainly there is room, and the employees affected with the forge are going to be reemployed in other divisions. But this government is much more concerned that they would like to see that forge continue to run. And as I told the honourable member last week, staff has contacted the management of Trenton Works, and we are working with them as well as other private companies who may be interested in purchasing that forge, and those discussions and work continue, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Trenton Works factory contains the largest open die forging press in Canada and the second largest on the continent. And actually there are two parts to the Trenton Works operation, the forge and the railcar plant. Not long ago, when the railcar market was sluggish, it was the forge that paid the bills and helped keep the railcar plant viable. And now, when there are orders coming in and certainly lots of potential for the forge, the company is prepared to shut it down. So, Mr. Speaker, despite claims to the contrary, this government is abandoning workers in rural Nova Scotia. So I'd like to ask the Minister of Economic Development, why is the government prepared to lay out incentives to attract shorter-term jobs like at call centres, but refuses to act to save these long-standing jobs at Trenton Works?
Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the member opposite raises some good points. And in his absence from the House during the last administration, certainly the car works did have some employment problems. And I'm proud to say it was this government who worked very closely with Trenton Works and enabled them to receive contracts to keep Trenton Works, the rail division, working, and the opportunity to get more contracts where they're reaching the benefits. And currently, we are working with the management, as I pointed out, to see that all opportunities are explored to keep the forge working.
Member for Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During my absence, when the Tory member was here, things were down, and now there's all kinds of potential things are coming back. Mr. Speaker, the employees of Trenton Works they're hard-working people, Mr. Speaker. They aren't asking for charity. They aren't asking for special treatment. All they want is to keep working hard every day to earn their paychecks. We know the employees there right now are appealing to the Board of Directors of Greenbrier to keep the forge open. So my question, Mr. Speaker, has the Minister approached the board at Greenbrier about saving these jobs, and if so, what was their response?
Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, and I can certainly state the House as I did last week, and I hope the honourable member did hear my comments last week, that we have approached the management of Trenton Works and working closely with them to see that all possible avenues are explored to keep the forge running, whether it's a new owner or a present condition. And certainly I want to state that clearly for the record, so the honourable member will remember that.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation. Highway Planning and Design Group proposed that a study be commissioned to perform traffic modeling and a benefit cost analysis be completed on all three alternatives that are presently being considered to replace the existing at-grade intersection on Highway 101 at exit 8A Ben Jackson Road. My question for the Minister is, once the benefit cost study is complete, which is due this month, does the Minister plan to take these results and release them to the community for their input?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, the results of the study will certainly be evident to all concerned.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Well, the reason I asked the question, Mr. Minister, is the Minister's track record in responding to repeated requests from the community has been very poor. And although members of his department did conduct a public presentation in the community, there was no opportunity for public input. My question for the Minister is, will the Minister make the commitment before a decision is made on this very important intersection, that the members in the community, such as the mayor and the warden of Kings County, and in fact all people in these rural communities, the businesses who operate in these communities, the individuals who operate emergency response vehicles through this intersection, all who will be greatly affected by this intersection change, have an opportunity to contribute and shape the final decision.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, a very long question, and the point of the matter is that the Ben Jackson intersection was put in many, many years ago when the 101 first went through. It was a mistake when it was put in there. The government under Gerald Regan recognized it, and we're going to close it. But because of popular demand, he decided to leave it open. And Mr. Speaker, that particular intersection has seen more than its fair share of accidents over the years. Many, very, very serious accidents, I might mention. Mr. Speaker, that problem has to be resolved, and I'm committed as Minister of Transportation to resolving it.
Now, member for Kings West, on your final supplementary.
Mr. Minister, will you make contact with the Mayor of Hantsport and the more than 1,000 members in this community who have signed a petition concerning the Ben Jackson interchange and include them in the important decision affecting their community?
Now, Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
I'll have the honourable member know that I meet with Mayor Foker on numerous occasions, and whenever he wants to contact me, he knows my telephone number, and he does contact me. And I met with his council just very, very recently, and we discussed highway matters. So, Mr. Speaker, there's no shortage of flow of information between Mayor Foker and myself.
Honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage. There you go. Yesterday, the chair of the Arts and Culture Partnership Council resigned, denouncing what he described as insufficient support, inadequate consultation, and ministerial indifference. The former chair states that the minister met with the council board only twice since its creation, and one of those times was a social function. So my question to the minister, why did the minister bother in creating a replacement for the former Arm's Length Arts Council he disbanded if he had no intention of working with the new body?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Gillespie did put a great deal of time and effort into the council during the past year. I accepted his resignation on April 28th, Mr. Speaker. On May 1st, the council appointed a new interim chair until their next annual meeting, and as well, Mr. Speaker, they also put on the record disassociating themselves with the content of Mr. Gillespie's letter.
Honourable member for Halifax Fairview, and your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The evolution of this new partnership council seems to be fulfilling the prophecy the arts sector made when the Arm's Length Arts Council was put to an untimely end by this minister. The former chair, who was in a better position than any other member of the board to see the attitude of this minister on a day-to-day basis, has made some serious allegations of political interference by departmental staff, a total lack of consultation with the new council on culture initiatives, and the inability of the new council to connect with the arts community. So my question to the minister is, why did the minister choose to exclude the Partnership Council entirely from the process of creating the $3 million music sector strategy?
Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I mentioned, the Partnership Council has done a tremendous amount of work, Mr. Speaker, and I will table a progress report as of April 30th, 2004 with respect to many of their accomplishments, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member Halifax Fairview, and your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The suggestion has been made that the reason the minister didn't consult with the Partnership Council is because he's got his own ideas about what he'd like to do with that $3 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, this minister may or may not agree with Mr. Gillespie, but the fact of the matter is the arts community has always had its doubts about the new council, preferring the old arm's length organization. So my final question to the minister, given the public concerns over how the council is operating, will the minister take yesterday's suggestion from the Leader of the Opposition and have this matter referred to a committee of this legislature for a public hearing.
There you go.
Now, Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And what I will say, Mr. Speaker, is that individuals such as Terry Kelly, individuals such as Paul Gallant, individuals such as Duella Folds, individuals such as Ken Swartz, individuals such as Laura McNutt, Mr. Speaker, deserve to be recognized for the work they have done during the past year, both by the NDP and as well by the people of this province, Mr. Speaker. They will continue to do that valuable work for this province.
Now, member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is also for the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage. Mr. Speaker, this government put in place the Nova Scotia Arts Commission, replacing the very highly regarded Nova Scotia Arts Council. At that time, the minister said the commission would work closely with the government and the minister to ensure that decisions were made based on the best interest of the arts community and the long-term viability of the industry. So my question for the minister is, how many times did he meet with the executive of the commission over the past 12 months?
Now, Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There are two specific meetings which come to my mind, but I can certainly get the exact dates and get back to the member with respect to the dates.
Now, member for Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The chair of the Arts Commission has resigned yesterday, as which was stated earlier, and he's blaming the government for not consulting with the commission. The minister seems to be claiming that the fact the commission was being consulted by the government. So will the minister tell this House what input into the cultural spending decisions outlined in the recent provincial budget, including the plan to put $750,000 towards this summer's Acadian celebrations, the commission and its executive had?
Now, Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I just tabled, and the member and all members of the House have an opportunity to take a look at a variety of the achievements and activities which are both completed and underway by the Council, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the $750,000 we are investing in the Acadian celebrations, as well as the $750,000 we are investing in the music strategy, are good, strong investments. And we work with the Council, but we also work with such groups as the Music Industry Association of Nova Scotia and LaFan.
Now, a member for Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The arts community deserves to have a voice when it comes to the spending decisions made by this government on cultural issues.
Order, please. The member for Annapolis has the floor for his final supplementary.
The arts community deserves to have a voice when it comes to the spending decisions made by this government on cultural issues. So my question is, what steps has the minister taken to ensure that the Arts Commission begins to have input in funding decisions made by his government?
Now, Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, the Arts and Culture Partnership Council meets on a monthly basis, Mr. Speaker, and it is really a true partnership. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, if any group in this House that should recognize the value of a partnership, it should be the Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker, who did establish the Tourism Partnership Council. And Mr. Speaker, and that was a wise move at that time, and I believe the creation of the Arts and Culture Partnership Council was also a wise move, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour, Mr. Speaker. Last week the Minister of Environment and Labour said that he thought the consultation process on the changes to WCB were a good process, and he didn't have any concerns about the objections being raised by labour and injured workers during his announcement last week, Mr. Speaker. But I'll quote what the injured workers are saying, Mr. Speaker, then I'll table it. The draft regulations mirror the proposal put forth by the Workers' Compensation Board and totally ignore the opinions and needs expressed by stakeholders of the workers' compensation system, that is, injured workers, labour, and the employers, Mr. Speaker. Although we do not agree with every issue, stakeholders are willing to cooperate more and more. And I'll table that, Mr. Speaker, and that's what they're saying. Yet this minister decided his best place was toadying up to the chair of the WCB. So I want to ask this minister, why do you find it more comfortable toadying up to the chair than with the stakeholders?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Home run. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to say that there was very valuable consultation that took place during this process. The Workers' Compensation held meetings, and certainly there were members of my staff who held meetings and received very valuable information from injured workers and from all parties that were involved, and all that information was taken into consideration before a decision was made.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
If the backbenchers over there are expecting a home run, in that vernacular, I think that the minister just balked at the pitch, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a board where the chair likes to conduct board meetings from conference calls in Florida. And that's who this minister is taking his lead from. This minister is ignoring everything that's being told by stakeholders. They told him, do not implement the AMA 5th edition, but go by way of the MLDA, Mr. Speaker, but he ignored that. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask him, why aren't doctors that represent workers in Nova Scotia good enough for this board?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier, we certainly we're committed to the consultation process. We selected a system which we believe is fair and reasonable after extensive consultation, and we know that it will work in the future.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying hard not to get too exercised about this because this minister knows absolutely nothing about it. This minister knows that this is going back to court. All the offending sections of 10 are going to be back in the federal court. You've chose to ignore that, but you're going to go because your buddy says, don't worry, be happy. People are injured. People are being forced back to work because they don't have enough revenue coming in. I'm going to ask you one more time, Minister, why don't you listen to the good doctors that represent injured workers and not the ones that toady up to the board?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I announced a process that would put $168 million out into the pockets of injured workers who had chronic pain and had not been treated fairly. I believe that's fair. I believe the system we picked is fair, and I'm sure that it will work.
Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the minister responsible for the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation. One of the justifications to legalize gambling is to get some control over it and to minimize the known social harms. Since 1995, the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation has been responsible for the business of gaming in our province. My question for the minister is, can the minister confirm if the CEO of the Gaming Corporation was paid a bonus in the most recent year available, and if so, how much, and on what basis would the bonus have been awarded?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the honourable member had an opportunity, I'm sure, to be at the Public Accounts Committee to speak with the chairman of the Gaming Corporation yesterday, and the information that she provided, or the information that the chair provided, was that there was a bonus for the year 2002-2003. It was approximately $9,000, and it was based on the performance of the corporation, based on responsible gaming and based on achieving the objectives of all of the divisions of the Gaming Corporation.
The honourable member Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much. Mr. Minister, you've confirmed the bonus scheme that's in place, and the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation clearly has a conflict of interest in trying to balance its mandate and mission statement to provide responsible gaming and to hit revenue targets. My question to the minister is, how can the minister expect the CEO to reduce addiction to gambling when, in fact, she is paid a generous bonus based on continued VLT use and profits?
Here, here.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member mentions only a small portion of the challenge that the chairman of the president of the Gaming Corporation has. There is a lot of different divisions and a different program, Mr. Speaker. But as the president said yesterday, there is a lot of initiatives that they take in terms of educating people, in terms of responsible gambling, and in terms of finding machines and finding games and things that will enable people not to become addictive. It's a big corporation, Mr. Chairman, and people in corporations, in these corporations, have to be able to meet their objectives and targets.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My final question is for the Premier. At the Public Accounts Committee yesterday, the CEO did provide the information that 10 of the 159 suicides in 2002 had problem gaming as a contributing factor. Obviously, the problems of gaming in our province are widespread. My question to the Premier is, would you not admit that your policy to reduce gambling addictions in Nova Scotia is failing?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the questioner has a good point. We are, as a government, disturbed at some of the statistics that are coming forward, and we have asked the Gaming Commission to look at those statistics and come forward with some initiatives that will provide a more responsible approach for government to take. And when that information is available, we will act on that information.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East have about 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after World War II, large stockpiles of chemical and biological weapons were disposed of at sea. And we know that some of these munition dump sites are off the shores of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, my office filed a Freedom of Information request looking for any information that the Department of Environment and Labour had on these sites, and we were told they had nothing. Mr. Speaker, what is it going to take to the Minister of Environment and Labour, what is it going to take for his department to recognize that this is a serious situation, and what is he going to do to investigate this?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour, about 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess I would suggest that perhaps the member opposite contact the Department of National Defence or Department of Fisheries and Oceans and find out what they have documented with regards to these sites. It would be their responsibility.
Thank you. Time allotted for question period has expired. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce 5 members of the NSGEU Community Services Working Group who are in the East Gallery. They are here to recognize the 2nd anniversary of retribution by the Department of Community Services against 12 child protection workers for doing their duty. And I'd like them to rise as I read their names. Wanda Pulsiver from the Cumberland office of the Department of Community Services. Karen Peters-Newell from the Shelburne office. Blair Pellerin from the Guysborough office. Christine Pinch from the Hants, Kings and Annapolis office. And Joanne McAdam from the New Glasgow office. Right. And I ask my legislative colleagues to extend a warm welcome, please.
Certainly welcome our special guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. Government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolving the committee of the whole House on bills.
Is it agreed?
Recognize the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 67, the House of Assembly Act?
Bill number 67, the House of Assembly Act. Shall the clauses carry? Carried. Shall the title carry? Carried. Shall the bill carry? Carried. Bill is carried. Pen's not working. Need your pen. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 68, the International Interests in Mobile Aircraft Equipment Act?
Bill number 68. Shall the clauses carry? Shall the schedules carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Bill's carried. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chair, I move the committee to now rise and report these bills.
Chairman of the committee and the whole House on bills, reports.
The committee's met considered two bills, Bills 67 and 68. The chairman's been instructed to recommend them to the favorable consideration of the House, each without amendment.
For these bills be read at a third time at a later date. Thank you. Yum. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if I could have the agreement of the House for approximately a 10-minute recess.
Is agreed? The House will resume at 3 p.m. Sorry, 2 p.m. 2 p.m.